you doing? It is another Wednesday, and if Wednesday is no longer, or it's not yet one of your favorite days in TV viewing, then I'm not doing the right job. I'm hoping that Wednesday is becoming one of your favorite days, especially during night TV viewing right here on Rwanda Television. My name, as always, is Eugene Anango. It's always a pleasure being right here to have very important conversations that shape the news agenda, conversations that matter to you on this amazing talk show called The Summit, an all-access summit that you are most definitely invited. Listen, we're going to have a very good conversation, and it's a conversation that still skirts around the conversation on the need to empower young people across Africa. We are talking about the financing of the future, the funding landscape, the funding options for startups in Africa. And I have a great team, a great panel right here in the show. Let me try to introduce one of them is none other than Michael Mutie, who is investment associate at Launch Africa Ventures, a capital ventures institution. He's joining us in Accra, Ghana, but he's usually based in Mauritius. Michael, thank you so much for making time for joining us in the program. Also joining us all the way in Nigeria is none other than Olawale Rotimi. Rotimi, I've watched his story, I've seen his growth, and of course today he is actually leading JR Farms Africa, which is currently operating in three countries, and of course they are having a team of over 90 direct staff, but of course also operating 3 commercial scale factories. Rotimi is also joining us on the show, and he'll be sharing with us some of the things that you need to do to be able to scale up from startup to scaling up. I'll be talking about the guests who are joining us right here in the studio. But before we do that, we always say that this show is your show. And of course, it is a program that is engaging. It is the most interactive show on the land of 1,000 hills and probably across Africa, right? And we have been talking to you, and you've been responding back to us. We are now live across all our social media platforms, on the website, and of course also on our YouTube channel. And it is live streaming now. Now, listen, we had shared some of the things that we'll be talking to you about here, and we've been receiving some of your feedback. I see Samuel Baker did mention something very interesting that I wanted also to bring to your attention. He said he won't miss the summit as usual, but he felt that the topic was a bit confusing, and especially on the aspect of future funding, when we need to be thinking about today's issues. And I did explain to him why we are actually looking at the startups, because if they're not well financed today, there'll be no future. There'll be no future. Of course, we also have Abdul Karim Habimana, who is saying that as startups, we still have many challenges, and financing is one of them. We need collective approach in solving it, as one of the mission of our startup is to use crowdfunding to tackle this, and to listen on how things stand today may help to find the collective answer that we need. Thank you very much for that specific contribution right there. The Honorable Minister of Youth is an ardent fan of the program, and I want to say thank you so much, Honorable Minister. There is no day of the show that he doesn't tweet about the show or share the topic that we're discussing. Like today, like every other Wednesday, he says, African startups. What is a startup? Is every young person able to start a startup? Any required degree or skills? This is what he's saying. And then he asks, how does one access finance, local or international? What skills does what kills a startup idea, and what makes it sustainable? And he urges all the Rwandans to follow the conversation. Keep tweeting. The hashtag to use, as always, is the Summit RW. It helps me to be able to track those tweets as you tweet them. Let's kick the ball rolling right here in studio. We are joined by Sarah On, who's the acting CFO, Pesa Choice, and she's also an ardent financial expert. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Very happy to be here.
And I'm also told you're an investor yourself.
I do some investments.
Good
yes.
stuff. We'll be talking about why and how you actually, what you look into when before putting your money in an investment. Also joining us right here in the studio is Dixon Muhizi. He's the founder of Igi3. Thank you so much for making time to join us.
Most welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. And as we said earlier on, we are joined virtually by Michael Mutie, investment associate, Launch Africa Ventures, a venture capital investment firm, and Olawale Rotimi, founder, CEO, JR Farms Africa. Let's start the conversation from the perspective of right here in this particular room that we are in right. And I'll start with you, Sarah, because we're looking at the ecosystem and the funding options for African startups. And young firms have been able to pull around $2 billion US dollars, that is as of 2021 in investment, specifically the African tech firms.
Yes.
This is like a drop in the ocean.
Yes.
Some people say 2 billion looks a lot, but it is not that much.
Spread out among all the companies that are looking to raise is actually very small.
What's the missing link? What aren't investors like you seeing in startups in Africa?
It's hard to differentiate yourself as a startup in Africa. The moment you have a good idea, there's usually 5 others that pop up the next day. So, any venture capital, any investor sitting in any one of the big African markets is getting 15 to 20 pitches a week, and they all sound sort of the same because it's the same people seeing the same problems and trying to find the solutions, and a lot of what they come up with are quite similar. Yeah. So I think differentiation is a challenge. Differentiation.
So today someone wants to start this, someone else is almost copying the same, and it becomes difficult for you to...
And yeah, I think especially so because most of the financing, the 2 billion plus, is concentrated in a few markets. It's a lot of it is in Nigeria, some of it's in Kenya, some of it's in South Africa. Some of it, I think, is in Egypt. Yeah. But if you're in one of the markets that are not one of those 4, it's quite hard to raise financing. And a lot of what investors say is we're looking for companies that are startups that are serving a large market. And those are the large markets where it's not just large in terms of population, it's large in terms of spending power.
Right. So if you're starting from a small country, you already have a disadvantage.
Yes.
Let's talk to you, from where you sit, Dixon.
Yes, please.
You are in Rwanda. So you set up your startup farm in 2020, right? Yes. And then you wanted to reunite lost family members, especially those who actually got displaced during the 1984 genocide against the Tutsis.
Yes.
And then we hear here that a lot of the investments are concentrated in the considered large markets. How is it easy or difficult for you to actually match up on the same weighing scale, looking for the same sort of funding that someone within these big markets are also looking for? Talk to us a bit about that.
Well, for starters, we find it so hard sometimes, especially when you are in a sector that is quite not being attended to. An example is most of the investors want to invest where their money will come back from.
Correct.
Right? So you find it hard for some sectors, like for example, I'm in genealogy. I'm going to have to be introducing the whole idea to people, the users, the funders. Yeah. It's a new sector. Yeah. Most of the times somebody will be like, where will my money come back from? Or how will I be able to have this being scaled, you know? And you find that an example is like the children that we've had that survived the genocide, right? We want to make an impact whereby they can come back knowing where they are going to be. Because we use our system, we use DNA to match people. There's what they call in Kinyarwanda Isano. So biologically it's, say, STR, like short turn and repeats. And if we are able to digitize that, it's easier. But now, if you want to bring in investment, first you look at how am I going to make money back, you know? So you find that it's a bit of a challenge, but also us as founders or as entrepreneurs, we have to think outside the box, and we see how can we be able to scale faster. Right. How can we convince this person that give me your money, I'll scale with this plan. You know, you have this go-to-market plans and everything that all investors want to see and be like, I'm comfortable to give you the money.
Right. Interesting that you say that. And some people say, think like there is no box. Not even think like outside the box, just think like there's no box at all. I want to bring in Rotimi. Rotimi, I'm sure you've been listening to the beginning of this conversation, and I want to hear from you. From a journey for JR Farms Africa, from 0 to 1, and later on to employing 91 direct staff and operating in 3 countries, running 3 commercial scale factories. And when I asked you before coming to this particular show, how do you raise your fund? You told me, I never raised funds the regular way startups do. How did you do it?
Yeah, thank you so much, Eugene, for having me on the show, and good evening to my fellow colleagues who was also on the show tonight. Yeah, to answer your question, I never had experience of the regular startups the way they raise money. I started, as you may know, that JR Farms is a family business owned by myself and my wife, and we started pretty much with family funds. And then more like bootstrapping, you know, we grew, reinvest in profits, and yeah, we've been on the journey. By May 26, 2023, it's going to be 10 years. So basically, I never had experience. We started with family funds, and we're basically in phases, learning and also reinvesting in capital, which is very, very important. For every startup, every entrepreneur who's on the journey. I also think that what really helped us in the early stages, we actually invested a lot in learning. You know, today when you see a lot of startup, the focus is about raising funds, scaling and all that, but there's no investment in learning. And then you see a lot of startups that raise a lot of money, bogus amount of money, and then 2 years down the line, they already failed. And you're asking yourself, what went wrong? You see what I'm saying? So I think the conversation should not necessarily be about how to raise funds, but sustainability of your operations. How can you sustain these operations? You know, yeah, we have seen startups that have raised millions of dollars, and 2 years afterwards, they are closed. What happened? So it's not really about money, but also equipping with knowledge, which is one thing that we invested and spent time on. You know, investing in knowledge, growing on that knowledge part. You know, knowing the business that you're doing, understanding the challenges and how you can overcome the challenges, understanding how you want to navigate what is needed, the right partnerships that you have to build to sustain the operations of such business. And that's what has really helped us as a company to grow over the years, operating in Nigeria, expanding to Rwanda, and also in Zambia now. And now we have, for example, aside the factories, we have 13 coffee shops now running. The majority of them running in Nigeria, and one of them running in Zambia in partnership with Mount Meru. You know, Mount Meru is also operating in Rwanda. So we're sitting with Mount Meru in Zambia, and we're opening new shops in the coming months. So these are the kind of things that are quite important, you know, for young people, young entrepreneurs, particularly around Africa.
Right. Interesting that you mentioned the idea of investing in learning and making sure that you're looking towards sustainability. Let me bring in Michael. Michael, yourself within the Launch Africa Ventures, you guys scout around, you check around for potential venture capital investments. And we have looked at the pie or the size of the cake in terms of the investment volumes. 2021, 2 billion is the mark that, you know, African tech startups funding did hit. But we've also heard that the concentration is within Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, Kenya. They're among the top 4 startup ecosystems where funding is actually going to. From where you sit as a venture capitalist or an associate who's partly involved in venture capital investments, what is it that you look for that probably someone who's watching us today who's not in this 4 considered big countries could be able to benefit from the venture capital that probably is flowing within where you sit?
That's right. Thank you, Eugene. Thank you, Sarah and for your input as well. Sarah put it right. We have a lot of problems in Africa, and that's, you know, a blessing in disguise if you look at it differently, because that only means that the opportunity to address a lot of these challenges that we have in Africa is as big, which creates opportunity for, you know, for entrepreneurs to innovate solutions to these problems, and, you know, in turn raise capital from investors who believe in them to solve these problems. And so, you know, one of the things we look at, given what I think Rotimi just said, is the team. That's very critical aside the business. And at Launch Africa Ventures, we believe that, you know, the investment space is like a relay race. So you have, you know, your entrepreneurs in their very early stages, idea stage, you know, you have the incubator stage. So you have different players that come in to support them. So whether that's your angels, friends and family, accelerators. Launch Africa as an early stage tech VC fund, we come in at the seed stage. So that means we look at ventures that are doing a minimum in recurring revenue of about $25,000. And as much as we are backing the jockey, as much as we're backing the horse, we're also backing the jockey. And the jockey in this case are the entrepreneurs. So we need to understand their thinking processes. We need to see how much they understand the market, how they've built the product. Do they have any experience in the market they're trying to solve for? Or do they have experience with the products that they're building in trying to address the issue that they are going after in the market? So the team is a big part of our evaluation process, and then the business with regards to the growth trajectory of the business. So at the seed stage, we have a minimum requirement in terms of recurring revenue. Is the business growing consistently? Consistent growth is very critical for us. And we look at businesses that are doing a minimum of about 10% month on month in terms of growth, and that sort of informs the future of the business from a commercial perspective in terms of how they are performing. So yeah, we look at the team, we look at the business. We have another range of criteria that we look at, whether it's valuation and the markets that they're in. If it's a business that is growing consistently, we expect that they are ready to scale out, especially once we come on board as a VC. They're ready to scale out of their entry market. And so that makes, that to the point of if they're in a smaller market, for instance, let's look at Rwanda as a market. One of our GPs was just there recently doing a market scoping of the land. And basically, we want to make sure that we have ecosystem partners that will work together with us in supporting these entrepreneurs so that they can sustainably build. So if they've done their proof of concept, before we come in, we want to make sure that we have the right relationships with corporates, whether that's telcos, insurance, bankers in the country, other ecosystem builders, whether it's accelerators, hubs. We also look at later stage ecosystem players who will come in and continue the work from where we will have gotten the entrepreneurs from our seed funding. Later stage ecosystem builders that will put in more capital to get the companies to that next stage of growth, so they don't die out, so they're sustainably growing and making an impact within their entry market and beyond.
Well put, Michael. I'll come back to you in just a bit. Stay with us. We'll be talking a bit about the ratio of, African funders versus foreign funders, especially local or African startups. There's been a gap in there, and we've been seeing a lot of, international funders, outpassing or outdoing, Africans when it comes to putting their money in startups in Africa. We want to understand where or what is it that the African billionaires or those with the monies are not or probably not seeing in the startups within the continent. Let me come back to you, Sarah. Sarah, let's talk a bit about Pesa Choice. I mean, you are, a little bird has whispered in my ears and told me that you're actually finalizing for the second round, pitch for the funding for the second round as Pesa Choice. Talk to us a bit about the story behind Pesa Choice and locking the first round deal of investment, so that if there's someone who's watching us today and probably is thinking around what to do, because now you're looking at round two, but there's someone who's been knocking the doors and they've not even had round half. Yes. What's the secret?
So I mean, the story of Pesa Choice is it's a long story, and I think it's a story that a lot of people haven't heard. A lot of people have heard of us starting 2019, 2020 after we got chosen for the Norscan Accelerator, and then we start being in the news. But Pesa Choice was started way before then. And I think, as Michael said, the team is most important. The team is why people invest, because everything else can change. The product can change, the market can change. It's the team that is the one from the beginning till the end. And so, the Pesa Choice, I think, started 2015 with a very different product from the one that we have today. And we ran into some challenges. We learned from the challenges, as people have said, we've learned, we've grown as a company, and then we launched product number 2, which was a bit better tailored to the market, but still not the perfect fit for the market. And then we launched product number 3. So the product that we have today is HR software with a fintech component, being salary advances, and it's the fourth product in the time that we've been alive as a company. And I think that journey is also very compelling for investors, because someone said, I don't remember who, startups die not because they run out of money. Startups die because the founder or the managers have given up on them. So
and it's so easy to give up.
It's so easy to give up. You know, experience your first challenge and you just, you know what, it's too hard for me, or, you know, I've given up, you know, making a salary for too long. I'm going back to a corporate job. So it's very easy to give up. And I think what investors have seen is that this is a company this is a founding team that's very resilient. Whatever challenge, you know, you can throw in their way, they will. They find the solutions. They don't give up. They try and try and try until they find a solution. So it's taken us 4 tries to find a product that has achieved some kind of product market fit that, you know, companies out there are willing to pay for. And I think that's, you know, that's what investors ultimately are looking for. It's that grit, you know, people that are so passionate about this that they just nothing will make them give up.
Right. So a lot of things that people don't know probably about Pesachoice could also be how much was the round 1 and probably how much is round 2 looking like in terms of the investment.
So we raised about $500,000.
$500,000.
Yeah, early last year. And we're in the market for between 500,000 to $1 million right now.
Interesting. And sitting right here with us is none other than Dixon. Dixon, you told me you've not raised even a coin.
No, I've not.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Talk to us a bit about the journey and how you feel as a startup who's been trying to raise this fund, and seated right next to us, we're talking about people who've managed to actually raise $500,000. What's the difference? What's the difficulties? What are your pains?
Okay.
As a startup.
All right. So, like you mentioned, being a founder is going all the way in. You know, you're literally doing what others are not doing. There is a lot of sacrifices you have to select. You know, there are ways you have to change your life. Like there are things I have to give up. Like traveling, I first put it aside, you know. But I have a vision and I want it out as soon as possible. So I keep moving step by step. So career-wise, I do corporate communications and strategic marketing, which funds actually my project, you know. So I have to split my money to my personal use and the project's use, you know. But it can never be an easy journey. So I have to also be strategic on the ways I go about it. In terms of making the product keep moving, like earlier you mentioned, I registered the company in 2020. But I started working on the project and preparing it 2016, you know. And all that time I knew what I wanted to do. Though the journey has actually been very fantastic to the point that I kept like growing and growing the idea itself. It moved from being just a platform to reunify people using DNA to understanding that maybe some people won't be able to afford DNA. And now I'm working on a model. It's an AI model. It's a mathematical model that will be able to match people according to their family knowledge. That one will be much cheaper than the DNA part of the reunification. Though it never serves well for the people who have no idea of the family knowledge. Like the children who survived the genocide, they were like a year old or younger, or even 3 or 4 years. They cannot be asked where they lived and they would remember. So those most likely will be coming for the option of the DNA. But there are adults who have managed to lose family or separate through migrations, and those ones can be able to be matched. So the journey of self-funding was not easy. And I would have gone, I did attend some incubation hubs, and also becomes another challenge. As a sole founder and a person who's having 2 hands in different lives, raising, having to do some work, get some funds, put them right here, right? So you find it so hard, which also maybe say the incubators can think about. You find that themselves, they have the funds, probably the money is from somebody, or an organization, right? But themselves also have a business model and ways how they want to show the owner of the money what they've done with the money. You know, and some of those become a bit challenging for us founders. Like for me, there are some acceleration programs I actually don't go for because they would ask you to be part of the acceleration program for more than a month in a boot camp. And I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna go,
In
be
a boot
part
camp?
in a boot camp for 5 months.
And you don't have a
then,
salary now to run your business for
right,
5 months.
Yes, not only that, I'm going to be there for 5 months and come out with probably 5,000 or 10,000 if I win, right? But what's going to happen after? You know, I'm an adult who stays by himself. I have to pay rent, I have to live. So then you take me in a boot camp to learn how to pitch, how to write pitch decks and all that. It's understandable, it's needed, right? But when you find that you have less time on your hands, you end up having to put it aside. And I'm like, I'm better off with moving slowly, step by step, but not rushing for that.
Yeah. We'll talk a bit about how to strike a balance for those who probably feel like I have a job, I'm an employed person, but I also want to grow my baby, I want to grow my business, I want to grow my startup. How do you strike the balance so that you're not burning your fingers either way? Rotimi, I want to bring you in on this because you said earlier that family was very key and in the way you actually started raising the funds. We've heard from the previous speakers here, Sarah, Rotimi is not, is he available? All right. Can I push this to Michael? Michael, if you're there with us, I mean, let me ask you this, especially on the aspect of grit. Very important element right here. Sarah did bring out, and she says that they had to actually fold some of the previous ideas up to idea number 4 in terms of remodeling it for it to fit the market. We've seen people who probably just start with one and they remain rigid and say, this is it. And if it works, let it work. If it doesn't work, let it not work. What's required? What are the components that are required beyond just this great element of trying to remain resilient? And also speaking to what Dixon has said, in terms of balancing. I am a sole founder and I'm funding my own business, but I'm funding it through my employment, which I feel like I want to balance out the two. How do we see startups surviving in that kind of a model? What would you advise?
Thank you, Eugene. And, you know, I applaud Dixon for his progress today. Dixon, Rotimi, Sarah, I mean, being a founder and sitting on this other side of the table as an investor, you get to really see how resilient and how hardworking founders are. So I have a lot of respect for them. And just to answer your question, Eugene, we have a saying in Africa, it's a proverb, it's a famous proverb, and it says, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, or it takes a community to raise a child. And, you know, I jokingly say that in the African VC ecosystem or in the African startup ecosystem, it takes an ecosystem to raise a startup. And that's why, you know, I mentioned that as Launch Africa, for instance, you know, we raised Small Fund 1 about a year ago. $36 million. We further invested that across 20 plus African countries in 130 plus, you know, companies. And for many of these areas or for many of these geographies, Launch Africa has been a frontier fund, right? We've gone into areas where, you know, traditionally investors did not want to look at, either because the risk profile was too high. But, you know, as Sarah mentioned when she began, is that we have a lot of startups trying to solve for the same problem just in different ways. So they really have to differentiate their value proposition that they're bringing to the market. And so, you know, answering the question about how do startups survive, when I began, I shared about the team, and Sarah touched on this, the importance of the team and the experience of the team with the product or in the market they're trying to solve for. Because as investors, we understand that this is a long road. And so it will take a different kind of individual, a different kind of founder to survive it. But it also goes to show how important the right partner is, whether as a hub, as an accelerator, as an investor, whether that's your early believers, you know, angels, friends, and families. Because if we don't have the right set of partners, it's going to make it more difficult. You're already dealing with an already difficult environment, trying to build, trying to raise capital. And so if you do not have the right partner, it's going to be a challenge for you. And the partner means, you know, the partner in this context is whether it's an investor, a co-founder, someone who really understands what you're trying to build from a vision perspective and the challenge that comes with trying to build that type of solution in the kind of environment you're building for. And so as Launch Africa, for instance, the reason why, and I like that you and Sarah both, you know, started the conversation with the amount of funding that flowed into Africa last year compared to also what flowed the year before. And what we're seeing is an increasing demand for capital flowing into the continent, and more investors are looking to Africa for the opportunities that are emerging here, and also for the innovative type of solutions that are coming out of the continent. but it's still, as you rightfully put it, a drop in the ocean. And so, looking at the ecosystem, it's important because the field is different in Africa. And just to cut it short, Africa needs that ecosystem partnership to raise startups that will weather the storms, create impact, and also, commercially very viable. And so I'd say choosing the right partners, in addition to having the right team, in addition to understanding what kind of founder you are, knowing that the road is also arming yourself with a good knowledge of the market, a good knowledge of the products you're building, and also getting yourself the right partners, whether that's your early believers, your angel investors, your accelerators hubs, to when you start raising institutional funds to power your growth.
Interesting. I'm told Rotimi is back. Rotimi, thank you so much, Michael. That was very detailed, very to the point. Thank you so much for that elaboration. Rotimi, earlier on I'd asked on the aspect of finding the right, or building up on what Michael said, finding the right partners. And you mentioned earlier on, for you actually started within the family circle. For most people from different backgrounds, when you go to your father or your mom or some of your relatives, they'll tell you, I already paid your school fees. What do you want here? Go get your money, I mean, how do you do this? And then also talk to us a bit about the place of grit, the place of resilience, because, it takes discipline to see a farm grow to the scale that JR Farm Africa has actually grown today, and to actually employ over 90 young people or people from diverse, backgrounds. Talk to us a bit about this from your personal experience.
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. So first, I would say there's a need to first define the problem you're solving, which is what we did setting out. What I see, because also we work with a lot of startups, as you may know, we have a project also that supports startup in agribusiness, which is called the Green Agribusiness Fund, and we work with the likes of FAO, ILO, and all multilateral institutions in supporting these young people. What I've seen diagnosing many of those young startups is that, the solution is not in view. There's a clumsiness of ideas, there's unclarity, obscurity around what they're doing. So which is the first thing we set out doing? This is what we want to do. And then we have our cardinal goals, which also guided us in partnerships. For example, we don't settle for every kind of partnership. We have our 5 cardinal goals as a company, which is the foundation of what we do. And whatever doesn't work within the framework, or whatever partnership or whatever interest, whatever alignment that doesn't align with these 5 cardinal goals, we're not going to take them up. So which I think is very important for young people in business to understand this, to have this clarity, because these are even things that financiers will look for in investing in your business. It's quite important. So on growing the business for us, when I meant family fund, didn't mean I got money from my parents or something, but basically my wife and I, of course, putting funds together to start up this early. And I think one key thing is not rushing to grow, because a lot of times when you see a lot of young businesses, they are very hasty to grow. Today they are talking about tractions. Oh, we have 50 days, we have 50 that, we have 50 stores, but how are these stores doing? You see what I'm saying? You heard them say, I have 50,000 users. How are these users doing? You see
Sorry,
what I'm saying?
Rotimi. I hear you, Rotimi. But do you think the funders are to blame for this because of the level of proof that you need to give to them in terms of scalability? So you find that these startups really need to speed up the growth aspect because they need to prove a certain funder right or wrong in terms of the concept that they're putting their money in? Where do you think the blame should be?
Yeah, well, I think it's more responsible for the visionary, which is the founder of the business. It's more about the visionary of the business because you need to actually straighten your goals before you entice investors. Most of the times I see founders building high hopes for investors just to get the money. You see what I'm saying? And more, I'm not in the IT field. And also we left that stage of startup as a business. But I see this a lot around businesses that are still at the early stage. They build a lot of high hopes for financiers to get the money. Yeah. But when they get the money, you cannot see connection between what they have promised and the reality of the business. Businesses have challenges. There are challenges, there are macroeconomic challenges which you don't have power over.
When we talk about the microeconomic challenges, you're talking about currency issues, you're talking about government policies, trade barriers, etc., that you don't have control over. You have your microeconomic challenges also. So you have to be realistic when you're looking at all these things, because they are there and they're going to challenge your business. For example, now Nigeria has just concluded its general election. The first 3 months of the year preceding, the first few months of preceding the election, there were a lot of economic challenges. Macroeconomic challenges affecting businesses, policies that affected our operations, for example. I mean, I needed to be realistic as a business owner. I'm not going to get financing blowing out people's mind, around this. So I think it's really important for founders to be realistic, around fundraising.
Yeah.
You don't build all these castles in the year when you know that you're not going to fulfill all those mandates,
Right.
So I would look at it more from the angle of the founders rather from the angle of the investors. The investors want to make money. That's their primary goal. You can't blame them. That is what they do as a business. That's their business. The business of money is they want to make more money, and they put money in your business based on what you tell them. So you need to be realistic so that you don't build the wrong hopes, for these investors here.
Point is home,
I would say.
Rotimi, thank you very much. That's a very valid and very interesting point that I want to bring back here in the studio before we take a very short break. Sarah, would you say no to a funder who says, I'm coming with $500,000 and I want to invest in your business? Would you turn them down? Would you do that, Dixon? I mean, how easy or how difficult is it for a startup to say no and say, no, I'm going to stick to my grounds. I don't want that money. Because he says you need to actually stand your ground, be principled, know what you want to achieve, and also don't overpromise. I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, definitely don't overpromise, because you're building a relationship. You're not selling a used car, right? So you're building a long-term relationship. Whatever promises you made that you don't keep will come back to bite you in the future. About turning down money, we haven't turned down any money, but there are ways that we delay, that formal rejection. I mean, as I said, we're looking to build a long-term relationship with a funder. We're looking for alignment is very important. For us, what we have a vision of what we want to build and how we're going to build it, and our whoever funds us has to be aligned with that vision. For us, for instance, one thing that's very important is we like to hire, young talent, and we like to grow them from within. Our founder has many years of software development experience. All our software developers have been hired as interns, and then they've trained with us. For me, I train on the finance, a little bit on the operations side, but we're not just going to poach from other tech companies and grow our business really quickly that way. So we want to build sustainable value. We want to build human capital. There's a way that we've built our business so far since 2015. We've created a very unique culture. We've created loyalty within the company because we've done it that way. And if someone says, no, you have to double your team tomorrow, just, poach from whoever.
You some money.
They give you money, and we need you to double your revenues tomorrow. You need to quadruple within 6 months. That's not our vision for the company. So as much as we haven't said no, we'll do our best to find other people that are more aligned with our vision. And if we can close on some of that funding, it buys us time, so we don't have to accept financing that doesn't align with us. What
That's
we want to do.
It's a very big decision to make. Dixon, you've said you've not raised anything. You've talked about the challenges. You've talked about the difficulties of balancing your income and putting it back into your business. And would you, in your state today, say no to an investor?
Surprisingly,
what would be the reason?
I have before.
You have said no to an investor?
Yeah, for $150,000.
$150,000?
Yes.
Why? Due
to exactly, we weren't aligned together with the mind, the map I had for the idea. It is a genealogy platform. Entering into a bioinformatics platform, and there is a future of biorevolution coming. And what he was looking at was actually something that was just going to end up from surrounding within the ecosystem, just because the whole trend is that there are startups and founders and everything. So I'm looking at my concept or my idea as something that I'm going to be working on or keep developing for the next 20 or 30 or 50 years. If I'm collecting this data, if I'm collecting helping people build family trees, I'm trying to help their great-grandchildren in the future get to find the family members they knew, a built database for a very long time. And he had not such a vision.
Yeah.
So I had to say no to that because I knew how much I needed the money, but still the idea comes first. Which I normally actually tell my fellow founders that believe in your product. Yeah, just don't fall in love with what is coming out of it.
Yeah.
Even we tend to even fail when we are pitching, because the whole idea in pitching is that I want to impress this person. I want to impress this person that he can give me the funds, also that I can take this grant. Then you forget the fact that actually you need to make something that will be very impactful for the whole ecosystem. You know,
or even protect your interests.
Or protect your interests, exactly.
Yeah.
So you find that most of the times we find it challenging to say no, and the ones who actually say yes, at times they end up regretting in the future. You know?
Interesting. Interesting. I want us to take a very, very, very short break. And as we take that particular break, I want to remind us that you can actually be part of this conversation, because when we come back, we'll be reading your comments, your views, any statement that you've had in this particular program from the panelists or from the questions I've been asking, and you feel like you also have an answer to it or you have a comment to it, please tweet us. And of course, you can tweet me directly at Eugene Anangwe, or you can add the hashtag #TheSummitRW. I'll be able to track it and we'll be able to look at it. When we come back, let's look at the issue of the gender gaps. It's a very sad statistic that 21.5% of the 568 funded startups in 2021 have a woman in their founding team. And when we're looking at even the money that has actually been coming in, we've had that female-led and female-founded startups in Africa attracted less funding in 2022 than they did in 2021. This is according to a report by Africa, the Big Deal. That aspect of women not getting what probably they feel they should be getting. And just for the record, there's a founder that I had invited on this particular show. She's a lady, and she sadly told me that most of the time she gets the no but thanks. You know, we will not fund you, but thank you for approaching us. And that has been the constant experience, and it's very demoralizing, it's very discouraging for women who want to actually join this particular area. When we come back, let's put our minds and fingers on that particular issue, and we'll be back. Don't go too far.
RBA app is here. How'd you get it? It is easier than ever. Go on your home screen. Press Play Store or App Store. Type RBA. Search. There you go. You have RBA app. You have all RBA radios, news, business news, sport and entertainment.
Right, welcome back. Thank you so much for still being with us right here on the summit. It is 9:45 p.m. We just have a very few minutes still remaining for us to be in this particular four walls. But as we always say, this is your show, very interactive, and we love the way you're actually getting in touch with us and sharing your thoughts on this. If we do not talk about these things, then we are going to have problems. But the more we talk about them, the more we come up with solutions. Let me read some of the tweets that have been coming in. I have one from Dolapo, who's actually telling us right here that Silent Point by Rotimi JR Farms tells about a bound of African founders who meet Western startup founders in San Francisco. They all knew the ideas wouldn't last the test of time, but the Western founders got the funding needed. Startup fails, so goes the investment. So it is very important to be able to know what you really want to achieve in that particular statement. And he actually comes back to say founders and co-founders in conversations always state that fundraising is very brutal and very brutal right now. It takes more than a brilliant idea, but they all say the sacrifices have to be made. Also, it appears the global fundraising market is slow presently. Is it, Sarah? Is it slow? Is it? What's causing the slow pace of the global fundraising market?
Well, interest rates in the U.S. are at almost all-time high, so there's a lot of returns to be made in the North American market. So there's less funding coming out and looking for returns elsewhere.
Yeah. So the exchange rate.
The interest rate.
Sorry about that. Even the exchange rate, someone was saying that is also playing a role.
Yeah.
I have paracetamol on Twitter at Emil Turatsins. It says, Africa needs to invest in youth more than anything else because youth are able to participate meaningfully in every domain. When we say youth, means innovative ideas. And I want to bring in Mutei, venture capital in investment. We have had this particular narrative, and of course some people prove it right, that it is actually not just a narrative, it is the reality. A lot of funders that are actually funding African startups are actually not African in their own. A lot of investors are actually foreign investors. What is it that African billionaires, those with the money and the resources, not seeing in their native African startups? What do you think, in your own analysis, is the issue?
Thank you, Eugene. And you've rightfully put it. So I'll give you an example. Launch Africa is one of few, if not the only, VC that is bringing new money to the continent. And what do I mean by new money? So most of the incumbent funders, VCs or international investors that are investing in the continent are being funded by the same institution, if I can use that term. So whether it's the IFC, World Bank. And so what Launch Africa has done is bring in new investor money through the limited partners that we have on the fund. So majority of what we raised for our first seed fund was raised from about 250 plus investors from Europe, the US, Asia, in over 41 countries. But we're seeing that changing as we're moving forward, given what you just pointed out, that the markets are shifting. And so we're seeing more high net worth individuals, more investors in Africa paying attention to opportunities that are coming out of the continent. And one, because they are riding on the confidence that if it's, international investors have seen opportunity in emerging markets in Africa, then they are now more comfortable to put in their money because, some of these opportunities are, if I can use the term, de-risked by having a strong international investor who's putting a large chunk of their investments into the startups. So we're seeing that shift, happening. So I just wanted to point that out. One, it is true that a lot of the investments in the continent are from developed markets, investors who are in developed markets, but we are seeing a shift in that high net worth individuals on the continent and investors on the continent investing in homegrown startups right here.
Right. Interesting. Rotimi, I mean, on the aspect of female-led founders and the frustrations that we've seen, and even the numbers dwindling in terms of the amounts of money that are being pumped or is being pumped into female-led, startups, where do you think the issue is? Where's the problem?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know where the problem is around female. Yeah, but of course, we as a business, for example, we don't have experience really raising funds, like I said. But as a business, we have a higher working force of female, and also my co-founder, which is my wife, is also a female. Yeah, and of course, she's represented the business on many fronts. Yeah, so I do not really see any challenge with being female and leading business. I think it's all about the solution you're carrying and the value that you have to offer around the business, really. So I don't really see any problem with the gender. I see the female in our team as the most meticulous, most reliable. No offense for the male gender, but that's what we've experienced so far. You see.
Yeah. Sarah, as you put your money in your investments, I mean, does gender matter to you?
It does.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why female-led businesses don't raise as much is because there aren't enough female-led investors or VCs, and people tend to invest in people that remind themselves of them, or certain characteristics resonate with them. So I think that is one of the reasons. It is, having been here in Rwanda for the past 8+ years, it is difficult there are challenges that women experience in doing business that men don't. And it's not just fundraising, it's going out and selling product to older male clients, owners of companies. We go out, we sell our HR software to them. They don't see past the fact that we're women. So there are challenges that women face in operating this market, whether it's operations, sales, fundraising, that men don't.
Right. Yeah. Interesting aspect right there. I have another tweet coming from Umutoniwase, Jeanette, and she says, "Thank you for this conversation. We really need investors who trust us and reduce their conditions on founders. Sometimes it's okay to train us, but they impose a lot of conditions that sometimes discourage young entrepreneurs." I mean, Dixon, do you relate?
Well, I actually wanted to add on to something from what Sarah just said.
Yeah.
It is challenging for the women in the sector, but it is also caused by what the nature brings. My point of view on this, women are more focused. Yeah. I shouldn't be quoted on that, but they are more focused when it comes to deliverance, right? When delivering, like I just recently hired a team of sales team, right? And among all the applicants, the girls were faster than the men. Why did I do that? I did not do like the normal way of like you apply, then you come for the interview and everything. I cut it down and I was like, guys, I want you guys to start with a task. Show me that you can be able to help people build family trees, and I want you to start with your own family. Trust me, it's normal. A couple of guys were coming up with excuses, and the girls were actually doing it. One of the girls came up with, she knew about 50 family members, and by the time she finished the task, she had 350 family members. Even herself, she was happy, Now, that shows you that they were more focused on delivering of the task that I requested for, Now, what I meant by it, it is the nature. I remember when, in history, when Idi Amin said that let all hotels be managed by women, right? True. Because they can take care of it better than the men, yes, and all that. But I support the fact that here in Rwanda we are supporting females into sectors, because that way it will take away the other nature or judgment that people have been having of women. They just expect them to be following these particular stages in life. Some, if you study, finish, get married, and that's it, right? But they forget that if we put more women in tech, we are actually having a huge generation we are supporting into being inspired to become right. So you find that, like the number of women we have in power today here in Rwanda, if we give it, if we compare to another country, the number of women that have in power, you'll see it in 50 years. You'll see the impact in 50 years. And that's what we are planning to do. That's why, I think we should have more, but we have to also inspire them, get them be confident.
It's about building the confidence in that particular sense. I want to take this opportunity to appreciate the contribution of Imbuto Foundation to build the capacity of youth and investing in youth. This is paracetamol. And of course, it's very important that we have more of those that actually say we want to upskill, because skilling is very important. We had from this conversation, in the onset of the conversation, where Rotimi did mention that it's important to actually focus also on the aspect of training. And I want us to start taking our closing remarks, because also time is also not on our side, on the aspect of training, upskilling, reskilling, skilling. Rotimi, talk to us a bit about those areas and how to probably invest realistically in these areas when you are actually a startup that is looking for money to actually run your business. How do you do this?
Yeah, so I think the element of knowledge is really important and is really downplayed maybe by a lot of startups I've seen in Africa. Yeah, so knowledge I think is more important than money. I've seen a lot of businesses fail, not because they don't have money, because they lack knowledge, you know. So it's really important to invest in that. And it's pretty simple. It's about you, of course, piloting. There's what we call piloting agriculture, where the sector where I work, you know, start it small and you learn. And then, of course, you can also connect with mentors. You know, we have the Green Agribusiness Fund program, which is supporting a lot of young people in agriculture to train them, different kind of trainings. We've done trainings, for example, in business formalization. We've done trainings in finance. We've done trainings in packaging, marketing, etc., negotiating and all that. Yeah, so, I mean, this kind of trainings, young people should be part of it. It's very important. And learning is continuous. It's never ending.
Right.
For every stage, there's a new learning. For example, when we expanded business from Nigeria to Rwanda, we faced new challenges because it's now international. When we moved to Zambia, we faced new challenges. So I needed to improve in knowledge. Our team needed to improve in knowledge. So we need to continuously learn. Which is very, very important for young people to know. And also have it in mind. One thing I see around startups is that you're designing the product for customers, not for yourself.
Okay,
so
thank
when
you.
Think of your product,
Thank you, RwandaTV. That's very powerful. Thank you very much. Michael, just in under 30 seconds, in closing, where do we go from here?
Well, as launched, we are raising our second fund, so looking to invest in more African businesses. But, you know, speakers have touched on a lot of interesting things, and I'd like to applaud them on that. So we have a sister fund. We also do gender lens investing. We have a sister fund that focuses purely on female-led, female co-founded tech-powered ventures. It's called 535 Ventures. So that allows us to further invest into female-led, female co-led businesses. At Launch Africa, I think the average on the continent of investors investing in female-led co-founded business is about 1% on average. At Launch Africa, we intentionally do about 20%, and that's part of our investment thesis. So we do pay attention to the lens.
Thank you. Got it. Dixon, we are going. We are just about to go. One line.
One line.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I would like to actually tell my fellow founders and everyone who's an entrepreneur, please invest your time and money in something you know that's going to have jobs in the next 15 years.
Got it. Sarah?
Well, for us at Pesa Choice, we think the future is bright for the continent. That's why we built an HR software. We are looking to build human capital. We're looking to empower human capital, and we're looking to digitize the workforce of Africa.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And to you who's been joining us on this show, talking to us on our different platforms, thank you so much for making time. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you again next week, Wednesday, 9 p.m., same time, same place.